with puppet shows and theater performances. Bhavananda, a new devotee and former New York textile designer, decorated and painted the temple with bright colors: pinks, purples, reds, blues, greens, and bright yellows. That was this became really the style in ISKCON temples in the late 60s and 70s. It was very, you know, bright, and sometimes pastel colors, big designs around all the doors and windows, and it was really nice. I remember the first time going to the temple, seeing all those beautiful colors. The temple was really clean. It's just like a really, you just, even without knowing anything about Krishna consciousness or the spiritual world, you just felt like you were going into another dimension of the spiritual world. Let's see. From their kirtans on the street and Sankirtan devotees, the Sankirtan devotees began regularly bringing guests to visit the new temple. The devotees planted 108 rose bushes on Prabhupada's request throughout the temple grounds. Within a short time, an altar was ready, and the devotees brought Lord Jagannath and Kartamishan. Now we will begin full-scale deity worship, Prabhupada said to some of the women. He talked of beginning something new in ISKCON, the daily offerings of prasadam to the deity and daily artis. You can see this is 2.5 years after the start of ISKCON in New York City. And so Prabhupada took things philosophically. He took everything in Krishna consciousness very quickly. He introduced everything and spoke everything, including on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna in Vrindavan with the gopis and his parents and cowherd boys, and the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness he introduced immediately. But so many other things, including deity worship, he introduced very gradually. None of the American devotees knew anything about deity worship, and but they were philosophically inclined. So anyway, so this is 2.5 years later. We're going to begin full-scale deity worship with regular daily offerings and daily artis at specified times. As the Los Angeles devotee community grew and prospered in their new setting, Prabhupada gradually relinquished the management to his leading disciples, even for outside preaching engagements, which were often late at night, disrupting Prabhupada's normal schedule. He sent his disciples in his stead. He wanted to spend his time writing books at his apartment. He said he would go to the temple 3 nights a week and to the festival on Sundays, but otherwise he would be inaccessible. Only his servants and Tamal Krishna, with his daily reports on the Sankirtan party, would see him in his apartment. By December 1968, Prabhupada was producing his books at double his normal rate. He was writing 2 books, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and The Nectar of Devotion, and both he considered essential to the foundation of the Krishna consciousness movement. Krishna book was a translation and commentary on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, containing the stories of Krishna's pastimes. Wanting colorful illustrations, Prabhupada turned to the 2 or 3 artists among his disciples and challenged them. As fast as they would paint, he would write. I don't know. It's pretty hard. It's a little hard to find those original volumes of Krishna book now, or even the second or third printing. And as time went on, the art in the paintings in the Krishna book and all the other books became more and more detailed and technically, artistically advanced, because the devotees were painting for longer and got more experienced and more technically perfect in their art, and they were all sincere devotees and talented people. But if you can find the old Bhagavad Gitas or old Krishna books or and old Chaitanya Charitamrita's original ones, you see that the paintings, they're not very artistically perfect, but they're really full of devotion and feeling, and they're really nice. They're beautiful, and they really have the feeling of devotion to Prabhupada and Krishna in them. It's one of the first things I really liked was all the paintings. And you can see they're very simple, very, very nice. And this is Prabhupada writing to the artists. As far as possible, I will require some artist who will paint pictures from the Bhagavatam as I give hints on what to paint. But the artist must be very quick. Generally you can't tell an artist, I mean, unless he's working on commission or something, you can tell him it has to be fast. I'll pay you if you're doing it really fast. But generally for an artist, they don't rush me. I'm an artist. My inspiration can't be hurried. But Prabhupada was pushing his artists to paint very quickly. Artists must be very quick. 2 or 3 pictures must be done every week. These pictures will be used for my new book, Krishna, which I will begin as soon as I get the assistance of a quick painter. The 10th canto contains 40 chapters about Krishna in Vrindavan and 50 chapters of Krishna in Dwarka. So our books will most likely have the first volume of the 40 chapters of Krishna in Vrindavan with one picture for each chapter. Prabhupada described each illustration he wanted. For the first picture, pregnant Devaki, the mother of Krishna, should be sitting in the palace, and near the ceiling, the demigods should be surrounding her, praying for Lord Krishna's appearance. Prabhupada wanted Devaki in a different part of the palace for the second picture. Lord Vishnu, in his four-armed form, dressed in yellow, appears before her while she and her husband Vasudeva bow down before him. The third illustration would show baby Krishna lying happily on the lap of Devaki, like an ordinary child. A fourth painting would show Vasudeva carrying baby Krishna across the Yamuna River. The fifth would show Vasudeva at the house of Nanda Maharaj in Vrindavan, exchanging Krishna for the newborn child of Yashoda. Krishna book would be a summary study with translations and commentary blended into a single narrative. The style would be freer in this book than in his presentation of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, but essentially it was the same work. Having set such an ambitious life's project as translating and commenting on the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada was uncertain he would live to complete it. But the most important part of Srimad Bhagavatam was the 10th canto, because it contained Krishna's transcendental pastimes on earth. Therefore, Prabhupada wanted to render it into English right away. To finish the first 9 cantos before beginning the 10th would take years. And Prabhupada didn't know how many years he would have. But his disciples should at least have all the 10th canto pastimes of Krishna. And generally, that's the way of reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada said on different occasions. And he even wrote in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam that if anyone just reads the first 9 cantos, they'll be a perfectly God-realized soul. So, sometimes he made that point. They should read the first 9 cantos first, but at the same time, he was giving Krishna book, the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, simultaneously with writing the 2nd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because as Satru Maharaj says here, he didn't know if he'd be able to get to the 10th canto. So he wanted his disciples to hear. He knew they'd hear all the 10th canto from someone if he left his body before he could get to it. He knew that. And actually, that's what happened. He only got through the first 3 chapters, I think, of the 10th canto before he had to leave. So he knew the disciples would hear it from someone, so he wanted his disciples to hear Krishna's pastimes in Mathura, Dwarka, and Vrindavan from him, along with all his warnings, like in the Rasa dance. Prabhupada's books are full of warnings about reading the Rasa dance and taking it in the wrong way. It's just a boyfriend and girlfriend, like, yeah, well, I have my boyfriend too, or I have my girlfriend too, but just like Krishna. So he didn't want his disciples or any future readers to take Krishna's pastimes with the gopis in Sahaji away. So he included all kinds of warnings about that throughout his books, and specifically in the Krishna book, in the pastimes of the Rasa Lila, is that's a danger to our spiritual life, to take pastimes of Krishna in the wrong way. And anyway, that's why he gave Krishna book the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam as early as possible. Having set such let's see. Oh, the purpose of preparing this book, Prabhupada wrote in the introduction to Krishna book, is primarily to induce people to understand Krishna Katha, because thereby they can become free from material bondage. Vyasadeva, the compiler of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Shukadev Goswami, the original speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, had recommended Krishna Katha, hearing and speaking about Krishna, to clear the heart of all illusion. The transcendental pastimes of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were so powerful that simply by hearing, reading, and remembering them, a devotee would be transferred to the spiritual world. So as with all of Prabhupada's books, the reading, like a Bhagavad Gita as it is, or the Nectar of Devotion, or Krishna book, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, it appears to be, okay, it's a book. There's words on a page, chapters and paragraphs, and it's a book full of information. Like I read my physics book or my programming book or my whatever book. I read my book and I get information. And I use that information to do whatever I want to do. So the Krishna book, the transcendental literature, Prabhupada's books they're certainly full of information, but but they're transcendental literature. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is personally present in every word, every line, every paragraph, every story, every chapter. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the Krishna in book form. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. The Bhagavad Gita as it is Krishna. So yes, you acquire transcendental information, but it's much, much more than that. It's the sound vibration is transcendental, and it purifies the heart. It cleans the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. Like if you take a damp rag with soapy water on it and you wash a dirty wall with it, the dirt just disappears. It just goes away. It may be a very dirty surface of wall or floor, but it's like, I know when I was a kid, my mother used to have me help me or clean the house, and I would wash the woodwork with a soapy rag. And as a little kid, I was amazed at how the wall just became clean. And I liked doing it. So the transcendental literature, the chanting of Hare Krishna is just like that. It magically cleans the heart of all the contamination accumulated there for millions of births and deaths in the material world. The transcendental pastimes of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were so powerful that simply by hearing, reading, and remembering them, a devotee would be transferred to the spiritual world. We say that all the time, going back home, back to Godhead, going to transferred to the spiritual world. Those are words that we read, and we repeat the phrases frequently, but no, like somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to Jamaica over my vacation for a nice vacation on the beach, or I'm going to Paris for a vacation." So we say, yes, we're going to go back home, back to Godhead, to Goloka Vrindavan. It's not the same as going back to the transcendental home of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all His pure devotees, and live eternally in bliss and knowledge in our original spiritual forms, just playing every day, all day with Krishna eternally. It's we say all kinds of things, and we have some sense of what they mean, but sometimes we should really think about what we're saying. Going back home, back to Godhead, Krishna Loka is incredible. It's unbelievable. It's the supreme destination. Prabhupada's normal working hours were in the early morning, beginning about 1 a.m., and he daily used this time for writing Krishna. But now he added a second intensive writing period in the afternoon and began another book, The Nectar of Devotion, a summary study of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This work contained, in quotes by Prabhupada, the complete science of Bhakti Yoga. as taught by Lord Chaitanya to Rupa Goswami 500 years ago. Now it's over 560 years ago. Time goes quickly. Prabhupada intended the nectar of devotion to be the law book, in quotes, the law book for the members of the Krishna consciousness movement. If one wanted to know the philosophical basis of bhakti yoga, how to practice devotional service, what the stages of devotional service were, or what the goal was, he could find the answers by reading the Nectar of Devotion. Specifically for devotees, the Nectar of Devotion would help solidify the Krishna consciousness movement in the Western countries, where Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was virtually unheard of. Many people knew the Bhagavad Gita, and they were becoming aware more and more of Bhagavad Gita as it is, and quite a lot of people had heard or read some of the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Upanishads or different things, but nobody outside of a few, like maybe a few people, practically nobody knew the writings of the six Goswamis, like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was virtually unheard of. And in the early 80s, there was one devotee living here in the Boston Temple. Is, I think, a professor, maybe divinity in one of the colleges in Washington, D.C. now. Uh, Divinity School. He lived in a temple. He was going to Harvard Divinity School to get his PhD there. And so he could do things like preach in the universities and into the other, yeah. And he was in this one course, and this was in the early 80s at Harvard, big deal college. And the one course was the works, a PhD program was the writings of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. And so there was some intellectually curious Western American scholars who were specifically studying the writings of Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami, all the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, and doing their PhD thesis on it. And it's like, there's nothing more elevated than that in Krishna consciousness, but they were doing it just in a way of intellectual pursuit. Very interesting what these ancient people wrote about yoga and devotion. It's very interesting. And very elevated language. Prabhupada said that Jiva Goswami was the greatest philosopher in the history of the world and things. And yeah, so they were doing it, but Garuda was in that class, and he said, but outside of the class, their activities, their behavior was just like anybody else, chasing women and drinking alcohol, taking drugs and eating meat, and just the same as every other low-life person in the United States or in the world in general. So anyway, so I'm sure they must have got some benefit from reading, but they weren't changing their life and becoming surrendered to Krishna as Garuda Das was and did. Anyways, but the nectar, yeah. Okay, I'll keep reading. It's just an interesting thing that I remember from back then. Let's see. about Garuda and going to Harvard Divinity School, and what he told us about the scholars who were taking it, just like everybody else. In the introduction to the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada invoked auspiciousness upon his work. Let his lordship's grace be on us, so that there may not be any hindrance in the execution of this duty of writing the nectar of devotion, impelled by his divine grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. I'm going to stop now because I got to get ready to go. Got to go get the flowers today. It's a tough day. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Krishna Prabhupada. Swami Shri Krishna Saraswati Govani Prachayani Session